What's going on, everybody? So this is probably going to be the last video I make of me talking about things I want to see in Far Cry 5's map editor. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. First thing I want to talk about is materials and objects. In Far Cry 4, it didn't seem like we had a whole lot of objects, or not objects, but materials like metal or, you know, concrete, broken concrete, things like that. Far Cry 3 had a large section of different types of materials that you can use for your map. Far Cry 4 didn't seem to have that much. Most of everything consisted of wood. If you type in metal at the search bar for the objects in Far Cry 4, there's only like, I think, 9 items that show up, and only one of them is fully like a sheet of metal. So just judging by the gameplay I've been seeing from Far Cry 5, there's a lot of different objects and different materials too, it seems. So hopefully all of those objects make their way into the map editor. I know some objects don't get into the map editor from the main story mode, but I would like to see all of that, all the objects in the actual map or the campaign map make its way into Far Cry 5's map editor. I got excited when I seen a dumpster during the gameplay. So I actually had to make my own custom dumpsters in Far Cry 4 because there wasn't any. So the next thing I want to talk about is object preferences. I mentioned this before, and I want to go into a little more detail about it. So say there's object preferences for lights. Maybe we can select lights to maybe flicker, or only turn on at night, or on all the time. I think that would be pretty awesome. And turrets. In Far Cry 4, we had the animation points. You could customize the duration of the animation points. Unfortunately, you couldn't do the turrets that way. So I would see some AI get on the turrets and they'd sit there for like 30 seconds and then they would leave. Especially if you build a compound or a base and you have like a machine gun nest, you want that AI to stay there because he's the guy that's going to see the danger coming. And, well, obviously you're the danger. With him actually leaving the turret and going to another animation point inside the base really leaves that machine gun nest pretty exposed. And I would like to see object preference for turrets where we can customize how long we want the AI to stay on the turret. And maybe just have an option where he never gets off unless things get crazy. So cars, I talked about cars respawning after cars maybe blow up. So kind of similar to how if your allies die, they respawn sort of thing. Especially if we're going to be able to have, custom PvP maps with vehicles. I would like to see an object preference option where we can have vehicles respawn after they blow up. So another thing is never die. There's a couple of linear maps that I've made where I want my allies to stay with the player all the way through. Unfortunately, that's impossible because they end up dying. I would like to have in the object preferences a selection where they never die. So you don't really have to worry about them and they kind of run along with the player like you intended them to be. So the next thing is maybe weapons. I really don't know what you can do for object preferences for weapons. Maybe you can select it to where it has infinite ammo or customize how much ammo that gun has when you lay it down. Maybe you can change if the gun is floating in the air so it's easier for players to see, or if it's laying flat on like a crate or on the ground or whatever. But that's no biggie. That was just a little idea I had. Okay, so the next thing is a pretty big deal for me, one of the big deals, and that's saving custom objects. There was a lot of times I built cool custom buildings or different objects, and unfortunately I couldn't carry those over to another map that I was making. I actually had to make a whole flat gridded terrain filled with my custom objects and then make my new maps under that same map and just save it as a different name to keep those objects. I would actually like to see an option where we can save our custom objects in like a custom object file maybe, and the way to do it is maybe highlight the objects and then maybe just click on a save button, and then you can customize what you want to name that object. And then if you make a new map, you can carry that object over from new maps and you don't have to start all over again. Okay, so the next thing is occlusion mesh. And this is actually a big issue. There's a lot of objects in Far Cry 4 where the occlusion mesh would just extend all the way down to the Earth's core perhaps. and I felt like it was really unnecessary, especially with the sandbags. Obviously, people are going to put sandbags on rooftops, but you have to be aware that if you put that sandbag on that roof, if you try to go into the building, the objects beyond are going to flicker and disappear because that occlusion mesh goes right through the building. It's crazy. I really hope that that is not as crazy in Far Cry 5 as it was in Far Cry 4. There was a lot of objects, like real small objects too, that the occlusion mesh was just long and massive, and if you couldn't put it on any second story level or anything like that, because it would go right to the first floor, and if you're going through the first floor, all the objects beyond that point just flicker and disappear. So I'm hoping in Far Cry 5 that's dumbed down a lot. Hopefully there's a lot, like there's more objects that have more back textures. In Far Cry 4, a lot of objects didn't have under textures or textures on the back of, you know, the object themselves. So hopefully everything's a little bit more detailed in that way, and the occlusion mesh is not so insane. So the next thing I want to talk about is uploading maps, voting maps, and just map sharing in general, really. And so in Far Cry 4, we weren't able to delete any maps that we had already uploaded, and that was kind of disappointing. Some people would upload maps and then they would find something wrong with it, and then unfortunately it was stuck up there and then they couldn't delete it. So sometimes people would play that bad map, which it's not a bad map, but because there's a couple of issues with it that you didn't see while editing, other people found out about it, and when you try to re-upload the final finished version of the map, people usually don't even play them because they're like, well, that other version sucked. So your map stayed up there and people could play them even if you didn't want it to, and it was the crappy version. But speaking of versions, you would oftentimes see, you know, people uploading like 15 different versions of the same map, and that was kind of exhausting to look at, and it's not fair to any of the guys that are uploading their maps, and their maps get put on the new list of maps, and then when you go and upload like 15 versions of, you know, for example, your map, it knocks their map right off the screen, and that's not, I just don't think that's really fair. So, I mean, in Far Cry 5, I don't know how they're going to do it. I would like to see maybe a limitation on how many times you can upload the same map, or just make it to where we can delete our maps and, you know, fix the problems there and then re-upload it. That way we don't have that issue again. But as for voting, I have seen so many good maps that looked good and played really well. They may have been challenging, but these maps get like 1 or 2 stars, and it's really disappointing. I didn't understand it at the time, and then I actually found out that in Far Cry 4, if you actually go to quit a person's map because maybe you died and you were tired of dying, you could actually vote the map. And I think that's a little ridiculous. Honestly, I would like to see where you actually have to beat the map in order to, you know, vote whether you liked it or disliked it or not. Because obviously somebody that's quitting a map mid-game, usually it's because they've died and they're kind of rage quitting. Obviously they're going to dislike a person's map. And I just think that a person will be more honest when they actually fully beat that map, whether they liked it or disliked it. If a map has a problem to where you can't beat it at all, and that's a huge flaw because there's something in the map itself that maybe you can't get to the extraction zone because there's, you know, you didn't cut a hole in the terrain to go in the cavern that will take you to the extraction zone, for example. I was thinking maybe, hopefully, players can leave comments about things and issues in a person's map that they need to, you know, go back through and look over and, you know, fix and just, you know, perfect it. I would like to see comments instead of just having maybe a checkbox of what was wrong with the map like in Far Cry 3, or just having the like the Facebook like and dislike voting system in Far Cry 4. So in Far Cry 5, I would like to see, you know, you have to, in order to vote, you have to complete the full map, and you have to beat it. And if you can't beat it due to an actual map editing error, then, you know, allow players to leave comments. And it doesn't have to be comments of negativity. It could be a comments of positivity, like really like this map a lot, and, you know, hope to see you make some cool, you know, cool positivity messages like that. But yeah, that's one of the things I'd like to see in Far Cry 5. A little bit more kind of, I guess, connection with other players and map editors and things like that, and being able to tell people what was wrong with their map. I think that's it. I should have made these videos like a year ago, but I just never got around to it. Obviously, all these ideas are probably too late now to get put in Far Cry 5, but yeah, you never know. It's worth a shot. So I figured I'd upload these 3 videos, the trilogy, talking about things I would like to see in Far Cry 5. Let me know any other ideas you guys would like to see in Far Cry 5's map editor altogether. It doesn't have to be a specific thing. So yeah, anyways guys, you take care now. See ya.